I need a place for Truly that is sort of like her room.
They called Truly Brown the luckiest of the sister wives' kids. But the truth is, she didn't hit the jackpot. She inherited the wreckage. If ever there were a cautionary tale about confusing survival with luck, it's Truly Brown's life in the wreckage of a televised polygamist dream. There's a persistent claim among fans that she hit the jackpot, as though escaping the worst of Kody Brown's patriarchal chaos constitutes winning. The argument goes that Truly, born after Robin's arrival and raised by a mother already halfway out of her fundamentalist programming, avoided the heavy indoctrination that crippled her older siblings. She supposedly reaped the benefits of their vigilance and grew up in a harm-reduced household. But calling that a jackpot is like congratulating the last passenger to escape a burning ship for only getting third-degree burns. Truly didn't inherit freedom. She inherited the emotional debris of everyone else's awakening. Unlike her older siblings, Truly never had to mourn the version of dad they once idolized. She arrived after Kody's transformation from charming cult salesman to self-absorbed zealot, so she was spared the nostalgia. But that's hardly a blessing. The older kids at least remember when their father looked them in the eyes. Truly's version of paternal love was a televised shrug. What the others lost, she never had. There's no mourned father, no warm recollection, only an understanding that the man who shares her DNA cannot be bothered to share her time. Optimists like to imagine Truly cushioned by a safety net of older siblings who adore and dote on her. It's a touching fantasy, one that wilts under the slightest scrutiny. The reality is that her siblings are scattered across the country, preoccupied with their own lives, spouses, and attempts to reassemble identities forged under public surveillance. They love her, no doubt, but proximity and consistency are luxuries none of them can provide. The family dynamic that once required a schedule to navigate shared kitchens and childcare has devolved into sporadic reunions and phone calls. Meanwhile, the one sibling closest to her age, the only potential peer in her fractured world, is off-limits, collateral in her father's selective affections. Truly's father's home was always open to others, never to her. It's one thing to grow up without a father. It's another to grow up knowing he simply prefers someone else's children. The story of Truly's good fortune hinges on one man, David Woolley, Christine Brown's post-polygamy husband and unofficial symbol of normalcy. Fans gush about their beautiful bond, interpreting his calm presence as the antidote to Kody's performative rage. To them, he represents the atonement that the Sister Wives saga desperately needed, the good man to replace the mad prophet. But even that narrative comes laced with discomfort. Truly didn't choose this redemption arc. Her mother, freshly liberated and eager to rewrite her own romantic history, rushed into a marriage that the audience was encouraged to applaud as healing. Healing, however, is not a group project. It requires time, a luxury Christine's storyline didn't allow. Truly was still processing her parents' divorce when cameras were already rolling on engagement scenes. She was handed a new father figure before she had a chance to grieve the old one, however inadequate he was. The audience got closure. The child got a deadline. The family's defenders insist David stepped in beautifully, meeting each child where they were. It's the kind of language adults use when trying to convince themselves that everyone is fine. But what we've seen on screen, roughly 10 minutes of polite interaction across 2 seasons, doesn't confirm much of anything. Truly's guarded body language during the wedding scenes suggested tolerance, not adoration. And why wouldn't it? For most of her life, adults have introduced themselves as part of a storyline, not a family. There's an absurd argument circulating that Truly somehow lucked out by having an absent father rather than a bad one. That being ignored outright is somehow less damaging than being intermittently manipulated, as if emotional starvation is preferable to emotional whiplash. In this house of mirrors, absence is mistaken for mercy. Kody's neglect wasn't passive, it was strategic. He invested himself where adoration was guaranteed. Robin's household, the one untouched by rebellion. Truly and her siblings didn't fit that script. His visits became guest appearances. His affection doled out on camera and withheld off-screen. The result? A generation of children fluent in disappointment. It's telling that when Kody referred to his own kids during a conversation with his brother, he said, "I have to interact with her kids," as though parenting were a contractual obligation. Imagine hearing your father talk about you like a chore. Isabel did, and it crushed her. Truly probably didn't even get the luxury of heartbreak. She had long learned that indifference is the family's native language. Truly's entire existence has been televised. The cameras that captured her mother's cooking segments also caught her medical emergency, an almost fatal case of neglect, dismissed by her father as an inconvenience. Every milestone, every argument, every tear was public property. Even her parents' divorce announcement became an episode. Christine's defenders claim she shielded Truly by having the real talk off camera. But what followed, a filmed check-in conversation, neatly packaged for broadcast, proved that privacy was still negotiable when ratings were on the line. The ethical boundary between reality and exploitation blurred long before Truly's birth. She was filmed in utero. She never had the option to opt out. What others call bravery in sharing this family's story is, for her, a lifetime of exposure therapy. Even her discomfort is content. Because the show has made Truly a public figure by default, her every gesture is dissected for signs of trauma, autism, rebellion, or resolve. Viewers, in their infinite armchair wisdom, diagnose her through editing choices and body language. Some insist she's neurodivergent because she learned to ride a bike late. Others label her defiant, independent, or coolly self-assured. In truth, she's a child who grew up on a soundstage and learned early that detachment is safer than visibility. But nuance doesn't sell ad time. Speculation does. The irony is that the same audience wringing their hands over her privacy also devours every frame of her adolescence. They moralize about the exploitation while eagerly tuning in for the next installment. It's fashionable among fans to credit Christine for breaking the cycle. Indeed, she was further along the road to deconstruction than her sister wives, less chained by doctrine, more aware of the misogyny embedded in their so-called faith. But even liberation, when televised, becomes performance. Christine's quest for selfhood was edited into a feel-good emancipation arc, one that conveniently sidelined the quieter truth. Escaping a system doesn't automatically undo the damage of having lived inside it. Truly's childhood, though less fundamentalist, was not less fractured. The difference between her upbringing and her siblings is cosmetic. Fewer sermons, more therapy talk. The structure of neglect remained. Kody's selective parenting ensured she grew up knowing precisely where she ranked in his hierarchy of affection. No amount of feminist rebranding could fix that. The Browns' empire thrives on paradox, pain as entertainment, dysfunction as relatability. The adults lament their trauma on camera while their children live its consequences in real time. Truly's jackpot is that she's old enough to understand the hypocrisy, yet too young to escape it. She knows her father's love is conditional. Her mother's independence is monetized, and her privacy is a narrative device. She is the proof that harm reduction is not the same as healing. It's simply more palatable harm. If anything, she represents the endgame of the sister wives' experiment. A child born into fame, raised in chaos, and forced to perform resilience for an audience that both pities and consumes her. The show's defenders point out that the family has survived, as though endurance were a virtue. But survival without repair is just stagnation in motion. So no, Truly Brown did not hit the jackpot. She inherited a legacy of televised dysfunction packaged as progressive evolution. She was denied the illusion her siblings once enjoyed, that her father might change, that her family might heal, that love was equitable. What she got instead was clarity, which is far less comforting but infinitely more honest. She is, in many ways, the luckiest of the unlucky. She'll grow up knowing exactly who her parents are, not who they pretend to be. But that's not a jackpot. That's the booby prize for surviving the longest-running social experiment in American reality TV. The collapse of a patriarch who mistook control for devotion, and the children who must now live with the fallout. If narcissism were an Olympic sport, Kody Brown would have a gold medal in self-delusion and a lifetime sponsorship from Denial. The man began Sister Wives as the swaggering poster boy for plural harmony. 4 wives, 13 children, and a perm that could block radio waves. Now, 2 decades later, he's the cautionary mascot for what happens when self-worship replaces faith and affection is traded for camera time. Kody's most laughable self-mythology centers on his claim that he must keep Robyn safely kept, a phrase so steeped in self-importance it deserves its own doctrinal footnote. Safely kept from what, exactly? Bears? Financial independence? The public's opinion? Robyn's mansion sits in a low-crime suburban neighborhood, hardly the wilderness of persecution he paints it to be. But in Kody's narrative, Robyn is the fragile saint, the porcelain victim who must be shielded from the consequences of his own incompetence. Safely kept is Kody speak for lavishly maintained. It's the euphemism of a man who redistributes family resources under the banner of chivalry. When the McMansion began crumbling under mold, water leaks, and the weight of his neglect, he didn't fix it. He rebranded the disrepair as devotion. The other wives were expected to understand. After all, Robyn's comfort was apparently a divine command. Meanwhile, the houses belonging to the original wives decayed in direct proportion to their standing in Kody's hierarchy. He wasn't protecting Robyn. He was protecting his chosen narrative. Safely kept was code for the only one still willing to stroke my ego. It's poetic, really. The man who spent 20 years preaching the spiritual virtues of plural marriage now lives as a monogamist with a public relations problem. The great defender of the principle accidentally proved that his faith was never about God. It was about access, control, and the luxury of being worshipped by multiple women on national television. When that supply chain collapsed, so did his theology. Robyn, the self-proclaimed peacemaker, became the final and only wife, not because of destiny, but because everyone else escaped. She didn't win the man. She simply outlasted the competition. Longevity isn't triumph when the prize is Kody. Robyn's greatest performance, however, has been her portrayal as the perpetual victim. She cries as easily as others breathe. Every camera pan finds her misty-eyed, lamenting the family breakdown she helped orchestrate. Her tears have become the soundtrack of the series, soft, tremulous violins underscoring the tragedy of being misunderstood while surrounded by evidence of her manipulation. She insists she never wanted this, the dissolution, the resentment, the hierarchy. Yet every time a wife left, Robyn's living space grew, her influence expanded, and Kody's loyalty hardened in her direction. Her fragility is strategic, the delicate act of weaponized weakness. She doesn't need to raise her voice. She has Kody to do it for her. The result is a woman who has perfected the art of passive conquest. She plays the saint while reaping the spoils of every emotional casualty. The wives fought for attention. Robyn positioned herself as the only one too pure to fight, and conveniently walked away with everything. Perhaps Kody's most grotesque accomplishment is the caste system he built among his own children. The OG-13, born of the original wives, grew up with shifting scraps of attention and an education in disappointment. Robyn's children, however, were not just loved. They were adopted, elevated, and paraded as evidence of Kody's devotion. It's easy to be a good father when you're only parenting the children who worship you. The older kids watched in disbelief as their father, who once couldn't find the time to attend spinal surgery or birthdays, suddenly became a full-time dad to Robin's brood. He ate dinner with them. He laughed. He was physically present, something the others never got outside of family filming days. The message was unmistakable. Affection is conditional, and loyalty is rewarded with visibility. The cruelty is almost elegant in its symmetry. The children who once defended him now publicly mourn the father he became, or perhaps the father he always was. The daughters in particular bear the brunt of his neglect. Kody admitted early on that he didn't know how to connect with girls. Yet he managed to connect just fine with Robin's daughters, those conveniently positioned extensions of his ego. Their devotion fed his narcissism. Their proximity fed his storyline. Every failed patriarch needs a stage, and Kody's downfall has been meticulously documented. Where once he strutted through cul-de-sacs declaring his wives his team, he now sulks in confessionals, reciting his grievances like scripture. He blames disloyalty, disrespect, and jealousy. Words that translate to, "They stopped worshiping me." Even as the family disintegrated, he clung to his delusions of authority. When one of his wives finally declared independence, he responded not with grief but outrage. How dare his property revolt? His obsession with hierarchy runs so deep that he measures love in obedience and worth in compliance. Robin understands this perfectly. She's built her entire identity around appeasing his fragile masculinity. Kody's brand of masculinity is performative at best, pathological at worst. He equates manhood with dominance, leadership with volume. His tantrums are not outbursts, but rituals, proof to himself that he still commands something, even if it's just the camera's attention. For Kody, the pandemic wasn't a crisis. It was a power grab. The restrictions became his moral weapon, a way to enforce isolation and control under the guise of safety. The wives who complied were responsible. The ones who questioned him were selfish. Unsurprisingly, Robin's household followed every decree to the letter, the only house that seemed to benefit from the new rules of engagement. The absurdity of his family protocols, the quarantines, the testing mandates, the travel bans, wasn't about health. It was about hierarchy. COVID gave Kody a new theology: submission through fear. And when the other wives pushed back, he declared them faithless. The irony of a man who spent years defying societal norms suddenly demanding absolute obedience in the name of safety would be hilarious if it weren't so psychologically grotesque. The post-pandemic revelation that the Shira Chateau, Kody and Robin's McMansion, required professional remediation for mold, leaks, and disrepair was poetic justice masquerading as real estate drama. While his other wives struggled to maintain their modest homes, Kody's supposed palace of peace rotted from within. The metaphor writes itself, a decaying monument to a love built on denial. Fans took delight in the irony, some going so far as to call it karmic. The black mold of narcissism finally surfacing. Cruel? Perhaps. But then again, few symbols capture the Brown family saga better than a man obsessed with appearances whose home is literally falling apart behind the drywall. If Kody represents delusion, Robin represents performance art. She's the emotional puppeteer of the series, manipulating sympathy with surgical precision. When her stepchildren cry over lost relationships, she tilts her head, wipes a tear, and laments that it wasn't supposed to be this way. It's never her fault. It's the cruel world, the jealous wives, the children who misunderstand her. What she calls misunderstanding is actually recognition. Everyone sees her clearly now. The woman who joined a plural marriage only to dismantle it, who played peacemaker while ensuring no peace could exist without her mediation. Her entire persona hinges on victimhood. Her power depends on fragility. Without the narrative of persecution, she's just another woman living comfortably on someone else's labor. Kody and Robin's relationship is one long PR campaign disguised as romance. She is always shy, always sweet, always the misunderstood muse who never asked for special treatment. The adjectives are as tired as they are revealing. Her shyness masks control. Her sweetness conceals ambition. And her misunderstanding deflects accountability. Kody calls her his loyal wife, the only one who stood by him. In reality, she's the only one who never questioned him. The only one who understood that submission was the quickest route to supremacy. Every teardrop is a strategy. Every quiver in her voice, a negotiation. Together, they are a masterclass in mutual enablement. His ego feeds her insecurity. Her helplessness feeds his delusion. For years, Kody has used the show as a confessional booth for his grievances, a platform where he can recite his victimhood while his ex-wives absorb the blame. Yet when a young podcaster recently suggested he might be mentally slow, the public watched his ego implode in real time. For a man who measures his worth in adoration, public mockery is the ultimate heresy. One can almost hear the gears grinding as he struggles to rewrite the narrative. The insult becomes proof of jealousy. The humiliation becomes evidence of persecution. It's the same script, just with new scenery.
At its core, Kody's worldview is theological narcissism. God exists only to validate his authority. Women exist to reflect his greatness. His sermons about loyalty, obedience, and family unity are less spiritual guidance than desperate branding exercises. Each wife who left him didn't just wound his pride, she disrupted his personal mythology. His rage isn't about loss, it's about exposure. The prophet has been unmasked as a petty man with control issues and a camera crew. Robin, ever the loyal disciple, reinforces the faith. She frames his failures as tests, his tantrums as trials, his favoritism as love expressed differently. It's not delusion, it's devotion weaponized. She knows the Church of Kody cannot survive without a congregation, and she's determined to be its last surviving parishioner. The latest seasons of Sister Wives are visual poetry. Kody alone in confessionals, surrounded by empty chairs once filled by women who believed him. The set has become a mausoleum of loyalty, a reminder that even the most controlling man cannot force companionship. He looks into the camera, pontificating about betrayal, unaware that the real betrayal was his own, of his children, his wives, and the very principles he claimed to defend. His legacy is not one of leadership, but of corrosion. Every woman who left him became stronger. Every child who distanced themselves became freer. The only person who remains unchanged is Kody, still rehearsing his lines, still believing he's the hero of a story everyone else has stopped reading. The tragedy of Kody Brown isn't that he lost his family, it's that he doesn't understand why. He treats love like a management position, loyalty like a debt, and women like subordinates in his emotional franchise. His empire didn't collapse because of rebellion. It collapsed under the weight of his own self-importance. And yet, even in ruin, he finds a way to center himself. Every interview, every tell-all, every trembling monologue circles back to his suffering. The wives' independence is framed as betrayal, the children's distance as disrespect. He is forever the misunderstood patriarch, forever the victim of others' failures to communicate. In reality, Kody's great failure was spectacularly simple. He believed leadership meant ownership. He mistook obedience for love, hierarchy for harmony, and self-pity for wisdom. Robin, with her trembling voice and ever-present tissue, remains the last mirror reflecting his delusion back to him. If there's justice in reality television, it's that the camera eventually turns from spectacle to exposure. Kody and Robin sit in their overstuffed mansion, surrounded by silence, convinced they are persecuted prophets rather than the architects of their own isolation. The children they ignored are thriving elsewhere. The wives they dismissed are glowing with relief. And the audience that once marveled at their principle now tunes in for the schadenfreude. In the end, the patriarch is not a leader but a relic, a man clinging to a crown no one else believes in. The empire of obedience has fallen, and all that remains is the echo of his own voice in an empty room. If Sister Wives were Greek tragedy, Mary Brown would be the misunderstood Cassandra, condemned to see the truth, cursed never to be believed, and endlessly blamed for everyone else's dysfunction. In a family that built its public image on sisterhood, she became the designated villain. Too sharp, too vocal, too human for the cult of keeping sweet. Her reward for decades of loyalty was isolation, and the world's most televised silent treatment. From the earliest seasons, Mary was cast as the difficult one, the woman with walls, the one who couldn't share well. Translation? She had opinions. In a system where docility masqueraded as virtue, having boundaries was treated like rebellion. She was a working woman in a family that romanticized unpaid domestic labor, and she carried the guilt of infertility in a culture that measured womanhood in offspring. Her bluntness was pathologized while Kody's cruelty was spiritualized. When he withdrew affection, it was called emotional fatigue. When she withdrew, it was bitterness. Viewers were told to see her as jealous, controlling, and incapable of love, conveniently ignoring the context. A patriarch who played favorites like a game of chess, and a sisterhood structured around competing for crumbs of his attention. Yes, Mary could be cutting. She could also be compassionate, resourceful, and most of all, consistent. She kept showing up to weddings, to family events, to confessionals that must have felt like public executions. She stayed when any sane person would have fled, and that endurance became her sin. In a family built on denial, the woman who refused to pretend became the scapegoat. The show's early narrative turned Mary's infertility into a personality flaw. Her inability to have more children wasn't treated as grief, it was treated as emotional instability. Every tear became proof that she was unfulfilled. Every boundary became bitterness disguised as control. The cruel irony is that this was a woman who watched her husband's other wives conceive repeatedly under the same roof, while her own heartbreak was edited for entertainment. And still, she mothered other people's children. She took time off work to help raise Janelle's newborns. She volunteered for childcare when Christine was overwhelmed. She was the emergency backup, the unpaid extra hand, the sort of role that doesn't make for good television because it's quietly unglamorous. The camera only came back when she expressed anger or cried. The editors didn't need her compassion. They needed her as contrast. In a move that should have earned her sainthood rather than scorn, Mary agreed to a legal divorce from Kody so he could marry Robin and adopt her children. The moment was framed as selfless, and then promptly used to erase her. She didn't just lose her legal standing, she lost her symbolic one. Within months, her emotional exile was complete. Kody stopped pretending. Robin became the legal wife. The rest were demoted to spiritual appendices. The irony is cruel. The woman who gave up her marriage for the sake of family unity was branded disloyal the moment she expressed pain about it. Kody's devotion to Robin became proof of his righteousness. Mary's grief became proof of her toxicity. The man can abandon, the woman must transcend. When the catfishing scandal hit, it was treated as cosmic justice, proof, apparently, that the mean wife got what she deserved. The narrative was easy. A lonely, bitter woman seeks affection online and is humiliated by her own desperation. But the scandal was less a revelation than a symptom. It was the logical endpoint of a woman starved of intimacy for years while her husband flaunted his new love on camera. Her betrayal became the family's moral shield. Kody suddenly had justification for years of emotional neglect. Robin could weep for the sanctity of the family while sitting safely in the home Mary's sacrifices helped fund. Christine and Janelle, exhausted and complicit in their own ways, could redirect their frustrations at Mary, the common enemy they didn't have to live with anymore. The scandal offered everyone something. Kody got vindication, Robin got sympathy, and the viewers got spectacle. Only Mary got reality. Years later, fans continued to debate whether Mary was mean to the children, a vague accusation recycled endlessly without detail. In this family, mean often meant set boundaries, said no, or refused to indulge chaos. She was the only adult who occasionally parented like an adult, which made her unpopular in a household that thrived on passive aggression and selective parenting. The children who once played in her lap later echoed their parents' resentment, shaped by years of narrative bias. Viewers forget that several of those same kids later reconnected with her, quietly, without cameras, without press releases. Time, as always, tells the truth that reality TV edits out. It's worth remembering that in the early years, Mary was one of the few consistent earners. Her income helped sustain a sprawling household where shared resources meant funding other people's mortgages. When she wanted to buy a bed and breakfast, a legitimate business, not a vanity project, she was mocked, blocked, and shamed. The same family that drained her bank account for communal needs suddenly discovered capitalism when she wanted independence. The hypocrisy was so loud it practically needed subtitles. When she succeeded anyway, the tone shifted. Now she was selfish for not contributing her private business earnings to the family fund. The rule was clear. Generosity flowed one way. Mary could give but never keep. Her labor belonged to the family until it produced something valuable. Then it belonged to them even more. The difference between Mary and her co-wives is that she never offered the audience a redemption arc. Christine reinvented herself as the victorious escapee, Janelle as the stoic pragmatist, Robin as the weeping saint. Mary refused to simplify herself for the camera. She stayed complicated, defensive, self-aware, stubborn, hopeful. In a genre that rewards performative healing, she committed the cardinal sin of being human. Her refusal to publicly trash her exes has been mistaken for desperation, as though silence equals longing. In truth, it's dignity. While others monologue about their growth and grievances, Mary stays mostly quiet. Her restraint reads as old-fashioned, even radical, in a culture that treats emotional exhibitionism as authenticity. She's not desperate to be loved. She's simply unwilling to stage her pain for applause anymore. Every family with a narcissist needs a scapegoat. In the Brown Empire, Mary filled that role perfectly. Kody's rages looked justified next to her visible frustration. The other wives' passivity looked saintly next to her assertiveness. The narrative required her to stay difficult so everyone else could appear balanced. Even after leaving, the myth persisted. Kody as misunderstood, Christine as liberated, Robin as fragile, and Mary as the ghost still haunting the periphery. The show couldn't function without her tension. It needed someone to roll her eyes, to challenge the absurdity, to embody the simmering discontent that kept viewers hooked. When she stopped playing that role, the series lost its spine. Chaos without confrontation is just silence, and silence doesn't get renewal contracts. Mary's real threat to the family system wasn't her attitude, it was her clarity. She saw the machinery behind Kody's self-righteousness long before the others did. She understood that the principle of plural marriage was a smokescreen for male entitlement, that loyalty was a leash disguised as love. When she questioned it, she was accused of negativity. When she complied, she was accused of manipulation. There was no winning, only rotating charges of betrayal. Her story became the control group of the experiment. What happens when you give your youth, your labor, your dignity, and your body to a system that will never admit you mattered? She's not a saint, but she's the only one who's never rewritten history to make herself look better. What little the public sees of Mary now, her independent business ventures, her quiet rebranding, her refusal to wallow, suggests something extraordinary. She survived the role she was never meant to escape. She's no longer the bitter wife or the lonely ex. She's a woman who endured her own public crucifixion and lived to post about it. The audience, always hungry for melodrama, calls her pathetic for staying and cold for leaving. It's the same double bind that's haunted women forever. If you forgive, you're weak. If you detach, you're cruel. Yet Mary's evolution may be the only authentic transformation the show ever offered. She didn't rebuild her life for the camera. She simply refused to keep performing pain that wasn't hers alone. Kody's arrogance is treated as personality, Mary's assertiveness as pathology. Robin's tears are saintly, Mary's are manipulative. Christine's rebellion is empowerment, Mary's boundary is hostility. The show's moral economy rewards whichever woman flatters the patriarch, even in his absence. Those who challenge him are villains, those who cry for him are virtuous. In that world, Mary never had a chance, but outside it, the tide is shifting. Viewers, once eager to mock her, are starting to see the broader pattern. A woman punished not for cruelty, but for refusing to collapse in the approved direction. The Sister Wives saga, at its core, is less about religion than addiction to control, validation, and the illusion of unity. Kody was the dealer, Robin the enabler, Christine the escape artist, Janelle the pragmatist, and Mary the cautionary tale. Each played their part until the supply ran out. Now the show limps on, a hollow ritual of self-preservation masquerading as storytelling. What remains of Mary in that aftermath is not defeat, but clarity. She has become the living proof that endurance can outlast adoration. Everyone else left to find happiness. She stayed long enough to understand why happiness was never possible there. The beauty and tragedy of Mary Brown's story is that she represents the price of loyalty in a system that never reciprocated it. Her loyalty was pathologized, her independence vilified, her grief televised. She carried the moral debt of an entire household that never paid her back. And still, she walks forward, bruised, wiser, unwilling to burn for their absolution. In a culture obsessed with redemption arcs, Mary never got hers, because hers doesn't fit the script. She didn't find a new man, cry on cue, or weaponize her suffering. She simply learned how to live without apology. That, ironically, is the one ending reality television can't monetize.
When the cameras fade and the rest of the cast retreats into curated normalcy, Mary remains the only one who feels real. Flawed, defensive, resilient, occasionally unlikable, and entirely human. The woman who was once the family's scapegoat has become its most authentic survivor. And perhaps that's the most subversive ending of all. The woman they tried to erase is the only one left with anything true to say. If that moral tightrope left you uneasy, good. That's where the truth lives. Subscribe for more.